We inherit the title of parenting by just either giving birth or adopting or having a child in our home, that we assume the role of parent, but we don't get the right to parent unless they choose us. Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andy Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what. Hey everybody. To celebrate us starting the pivot this week, I'm sharing a 5-day training I did about a month ago with you all. I'm so excited to share it. It's going to be a great resource for everyone who's starting the pivot with me this week, because we're going to be spending the next 8 weeks deep diving on these strategies. And so looking at them from a 30,000 foot view before deep diving is going to be very valuable and make the work we do in the pivot even more impactful. Now, for those not starting the pivot this week, I want you to listen to these episodes from the 5-day bootcamp very carefully, take notes, do the assignments I'm asking the parents who are live to do, because I'm giving you the entire Connect Method Parenting framework over these 5 episodes. It's the Connect Method Parenting blueprint. When you build a house, you wouldn't even consider building a house without a blueprint. It guides the entire process of building from start to finish so the house makes sense, so it doesn't crumble and fall apart. So when you're building a connection-based parenting structure, you have to have a blueprint so that it makes sense, so that it doesn't fall over, so that it's structurally sound. And that's what I'm giving you in the 5-day bootcamp, the blueprint, the idea, the conceptual way that you would go about creating a connection-based parenting framework and approach in your home. And I really like how I shared it in this training. Every time I teach the 3 strategies, which are the building blocks of the Connect Method Parenting Blueprint, I explain them a bit differently. I explain them in the first 3 episodes actually of the podcast, and they're a little bit different than here. And I love how it flowed out in this training. Now, 2 things really quick to keep in mind as you listen to this series. First, I mentioned a few times that the pivot is happening in a few weeks, which was true at the time, but it's not true as you're listening to these episodes. The pivot is actually starting this week. So if you want to learn about the next pivot, you're going to need to check the website in a few weeks from the time this episode goes live. By then, we will have posted it. And secondly, this was originally presented as a video workshop. So there are going to be times where I may say something about look on the screen or sharing an image, which shouldn't be a problem. I'm usually pretty good at verbally describing what I'm showing on the screen, but just wanted to mention that. All right, you all, let's dive into the workshop. And remember, if you're doing the pivot with me, we're going to be spending the next 8 weeks deep diving on these strategies. So listen to these episodes to help make sure you have that 30,000 foot view. It's going to help make the work we do inside the pivot even more impactful. All right, here we go. Let's do it. Hey, everybody. You guys ready for day 2? So today we're talking about emotions. We're doing a high level overview of the 3 CMP strategies this week and pulling back so that you can see the big picture. And this is, I find, helpful for people who have never done anything Connect Method Parenting with me. And also all you all who are here, which is so fun to see you all, that have worked with me, are currently working with me. To see it and to review it is so powerful. So I'm going to start really quickly with asking everybody, first of all, before I get to move into new stuff, I want to ask everybody, how did yesterday go? Now, some of you guys, this is not your first go round with looking at the 3 CMP strategies. Sandy, I'm glad you're finding this interesting. Looking at our own thoughts, because that is where the way that we show up in the world comes from. You know, so much of parenting is focusing on the kids, and we will get to that. But it doesn't matter what words we say or what we try to put into place with a chore system or anything like that. If we are coming to the situation, if we are resisting our kids' behavior, if we're judging them, if we're anxious or frustrated, we have to clean that up or nothing else really matters. So did everybody, I know some of you have been in the app and you're currently in the app and you're in league with me right now, but those who haven't ever jumped into the app, hopefully that made sense. I use the word app, but really it's just a web-based software platform that I had made to fit all of the needs that I needed. And let me know if you had any problems. Okay, so here's the steer overview. So situation, just the facts. I didn't double down on this, but you all, whether you've been with me for years or you're brand new, this is one of the trickiest things, is we are so used to describing our kids' behavior and in general situations in the world. And we think we're describing just the truth of how it is, but we're not. We're using judgment and interpretation and perceptions. Totally fine. We just want to get the two things separated, the facts from the reality. And when I say facts in situation, just the facts of the situation, here's what I'm talking about. And you all, like, I still get myself caught in this. So we are all going to review this together. So if this is the first time you've heard it or the 100th time you've heard it, we need repetition more than anything else. So we're repeating this today. It's just the facts. Okay. So it's saying words that can be proven. Now, as we advance in the steer, there will be situations where we do other little tweaks with it. But to begin with, we have to stay with just the facts. It's not going to serve us to try to get advanced right off the bat. So just the facts. So I have a distinct memory of walking into my boys' room at the time they were in high school. Now they're 20 and 21 and they're living in Chile and just off on their own. But at the time they were in this room and we had just moved into a new house. And I was so thrilled about being in this new house and it was what we had always wanted. And so we had worked really hard on making it look nice. And I walk into their room and it looks not the way I wanted it to in my brain, not the way I thought it should look. Now, my brain thinks I'm describing the situation when I say this is a disaster and it's a pigsty. They're clearly not listening to me. I like have all of these things like disaster. I remember just thinking disaster. And to me in my brain, I thought that's the situation. No, that's my thought about the situation. We have to parse this apart. If you want to take really your life to the next level, Amelia, you said that on a call one time and I loved it. She's like, this is more like connect method living than just connect method parenting. It's true. We're changing our life through the doorway of parenting because, you know, what better scenario, what better opportunity than parenting to change our lives and let that be our catalyst for a complete revolution in our whole way of being, because we can't get away from our kids. We can get away from a lot of other things that are causing us discomfort. We can't get away from our kids, or at least actually we could. We don't choose to get away from our kids. We choose to continue to show up for them. So if we want to show up for them and have it be a positive thing and not lose our mind or not have them become teenagers that resent us because we're just kind of on their case all of the time, we got to clean up our thoughts. So the situation is just the fact. So an accurate way to describe my son's rooms would have been a room they were sharing, hence even more of why this was, you know, the way it was, is I would accurately describe the items of clothing. I don't remember exactly, but like beds not made. And even that, I mean, I'm going to let that pass, but even that could be more descriptive because what I think is a bed made and what my son thinks is a bed made might be very, very different. You know, them is maybe just barely pulled up and wrinkly, and I might think that's not made, but to them it is. So we would want to be as accurate as possible, but you can see how there's so many layers to facts and truth. Okay. So we got to clean this up and we have to start noticing it. And it's something that your subconscious brain is going to try to maneuver and get into the old habits and old ways of seeing things all of the time. So in the app, there was a steer quiz or test. I don't remember what we called it. Take it and see how good you do. It's very illuminating to see if you actually understand this. And steer is really a way to see how you're creating the results in your life. Okay. We're going to get more into that in just a second, but I wanted to just lay this out for everybody. It's a review for some, it's a first pass for others. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. I want to make sure that it's landing. And if you have anything come up, or if you want to type out a steer for me that's coming up around your goal, hopefully you all made your, it says big mama goal in the app, but it's really going to be a micro, small goal that you're doing for this week. Okay. So situation. It has to be factual. We go into a court of law and everyone would agree that this is the evidence. Okay. This is the truth. So this is going to be so free. You might think, Andy, you're being really particular. This is really tedious. Well, yeah, actually both I am. It is kind of tedious and I am being very particular because I know that if you start to get this, it will absolutely change your life because you won't be fooled into thinking a certain way, perceiving, having a perception of a situation that will cause your nervous system to respond in kind. Okay. So that's just the facts. Then I'm going to have a multitude of thoughts typically about something. So I walk into the boys' room and factually, take a picture. Here's exactly what it looks like. I could take that into a court of law. I could accurately describe all of that. I could articulate it word, item by item and catalog it, so to speak. And everyone agrees. And then I have my thoughts about it. Now, I named a couple of them. Do you remember what they were? What were my thoughts? This is a disaster. They're pigs. They don't care. They're defying me. They're rude. They're inconsiderate. They're ungrateful. They're entitled. All of those are my thoughts, which a lot of us might put those thoughts and just say, well, that's a couple of different ways. Like, that's just obviously the conclusion you would draw from that situation. That's what I thought for a long time. That's just Captain Obvious. So that's what I would do. Or if I say this is a disaster, I think actually I'm describing the situation, which I'm absolutely not describing the situation. I'm describing my perception of the situation. So it's a thought, not a situation. Make sense? You guys following? Then I have an emotion. Each of those thoughts will most likely create a slightly different emotion, but there could be a cluster of them that all create frustration, a cluster of them that create annoyance, a cluster of them that create resentment. So we want to start understanding the cocktail of emotions that are running through our body when we are encountering something that's happening with our kids. So just the facts, the meaning you make from the facts, you're going to pick one of those thoughts and really look into it. Okay. This is what I want you to pay attention to. Underneath emotions, it says fuels actions. So I have an emotional experience. We're going to dive into emotions today as we continue our journey with peace. I have an emotion and it fuels my actions. I think of it like seasoning. So the words I say, hey, time to go pick up your room. When I'm saying that from a frustrated emotion, it's, time to go pick up your room, guys. Come on. Or annoyance might be similar to what I just did. You guys, like, why are you not picking up your room? That would maybe be resentment. You can sense, we are so good at this. You can sense the emotional state that someone is in by the way the words come out. By the way the words come out. That's how they are just flavored. They're just dripping with the emotion that we're feeling as they come out. That's why it's not as simple as me saying, hey, when your child does X, Y, Z, say this thing. It doesn't, that's so hit or miss. Most of the time it's miss because you go try to say the thing and not realizing that the emotional signature, the emotional energetic place you're from will make it or break it. And not to mention the relationship you've built with the child is very important too, and how you're viewing the behavior. So multiple dominoes in that, right? But these actions, I want you to remember if you've heard this before, and I want you to hear this if you've never heard this before, that it's the emotions that we have, which are created by the thought. If you look up that, like one layer up, it says thought, and then little arrow, right? It says create emotions. Then we have the emotional experience that fuels our actions. So then we take these actions, which produce our results. So what your emotions fuel you to do or not to do, sometimes it's action, sometimes it's inaction. Okay. So ultimately, all of these things create your life. So that's why I love the steer. And if we can look at it with compassion and kindness, you're going to have huge breakthroughs because you're going to see what's creating your life. And even if it's hard to see, and sometimes it's hard to see, it's hard to self-confront, it's hard to look at the truth of it, never blame or beat yourself up about it, because there is always, could say this, we could just focus on this for the whole rest of the time. There is always a reason that makes complete sense to your nervous system for why you're reacting the way you are, for why you have the perception. And it's not about blaming anyone for the story I have. I'm not saying like for me, I really struggled, and I still, it's still my bend. If I'm not cleaning my brain regularly, I will still go to a frustrated state around the house. And I could say, well, that's because when I came home, or when my dad came home from work, which I love my dad, he's amazing. So this is nothing against my dad. I know enough about his upbringing and how his dad was to know, oh my gosh, he's like, I can't believe how well my dad turned out. His dad was very difficult and very hard and very just not kind. And so, but when my dad would come home, he would start, kind of making it really uncomfortable if we had left anything out. Even if we were in the middle of something, it was just really bothersome to him. And so even though that is probably at least one of the sources from that my alarm comes from, my anxiety comes from around a clean house, I don't look at that and say, oh my gosh, my dad made me have this, disposition to have anxiety around a clean house. Absolutely not. I'm like, oh, I just come by it honestly. He came by it honestly. And I can do something about it. That's the beautiful part of this first strategy in steer is it's ultimate freedom. Ultimate freedom. When I walked into the baby powder blizzard, which I have, you guys, I have a picture. Have you guys seen the baby powder blizzard? Let's see if I can show it to you really quick. There's my baby powder blizzard, kids. And that's so cute. So I walk into, see how it's not that bad? My brain is like, it's really bad. It's really bad. It wasn't that bad. So, but I walk into the baby powder blizzard in 2007 and my brain has a total, well, I'll say my nervous system has a total freak out. But because I had this moment of miraculous clarity, I started to see the freedom. Like I had created all of the drama, like the kids had created the mess. I wasn't going to take ownership for that. That's not my place to take ownership for that. The kids had created the mess, but I had created the drama. I had created the story that it was a big problem. I had blamed them because of how I was perceiving it. I had gone into victim mode. And even though as I reflected on that story, because that truly was a catalyst for me to deep dive into all things nervous system, parenting, emotions, all of the things that ultimately culminated in me putting together an easy, doable, I shouldn't say easy, a simple, doable strategy to implement an attachment-based parenting framework. Even though, all of those beautiful things came from this, and I'm so eternally grateful for that, I also had a hard time for a bit, like really taking the ownership that I needed to get the clarity so that I could create what I ultimately wanted, which was consistent closeness and calmness and connectedness, no matter what shenanigans my kids did, because it was really obvious that these were very immature children and they were going to continue to offer me plenty of opportunity to lose my mind. I wanted to be more resilient, more emotionally stable than that, so I could create something different for them, because that would ultimately allow them and me to become the next versions of ourselves, to fulfill our potential. So I wanted to create an environment for my nervous system to mature, my emotional system to mature, and also my children's. So even though sometimes when we look at this, and for those who are in league, we do these incessantly every day. We try to do one if we can. It's like a workout for our brain. If we want to be healthy, we got to exercise emotionally, mentally, physically, all of the things spiritually. And so we're going to do this work. And it was challenging at first for me to really self-confront without the blame. But here's the thing. As you do this with me this week, most of you will continue doing this with me, which I'm so honored and grateful, and just celebrate every day that I have the privilege of doing this. And I do this every day. Got up this morning, spent an hour doing various different things that clean my brain out, my mental hygiene, I call it. So the easier it gets to self-confront. But if you start to look at this unintentional steer, which hopefully all of you have, if you've had a problem getting into the app, if you're new and you're not currently in league and you're joining us for this, and you haven't gotten to the app and done your unintentional steer, which is the second step in peace. The P is for pause, get present, thought download, we talked about yesterday. Then we did our unintentional steer, which was when we look back on a situation, and this week it's going to be related to whatever we're focusing on for our goal. We look back on a situation that didn't go well. The result wasn't what we wanted in our life. And we use steer. We use this amazing tool to understand why we are creating the results in our life. And I know this was like a very long tangent, but I'm going to bring it back and close the loop here, because the challenge we have is to be able to look at the messiness without beating ourselves up, so that we can actually learn and grow from it. If we look at our messiness, we look at our unintentional steer and we think, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. I'm a mess. I'm broken. It's no use to keep going because obviously I'm creating all of this. You're not going to make any progress. So just a reminder to be kind. And that's going to be a big focus of what we're talking about today. Okay, is to be kind, so you don't trigger your own nervous system against yourself and then you can't move forward. And I'm going to show you right now inside of the app. This was day one. Let me move my little, if you haven't made it inside, this is ignore how many things I have in my menu. Yours will, if you're just here for the bootcamp, yours will just have the bootcamp part. So, and you'll only have day one so far, because day two will populate later today. So we have this replay. You can watch the walkthrough video, all of those things. And so fun. So you can put comments at the bottom. I'd love that. And I'll interact with you there. Okay, Big Mama goal. We talked about this yesterday, but this is what it looks like inside of the app. And there's prompts to help you. If you've made one. If you're in league and you've made one for something else, make one just for this week, a little micro version. And then we have the steer test. Do this so that you can see how well you actually know it. I'm always surprised. I was especially surprised when I first started how often I would just get things wrong. And then here's the first couple steps of peace that we had you guys do yesterday. So I filled in just a couple of things. So he's rude. I can't believe he did that. So you would be doing this thought download. Hopefully you have, with your one situation in mind. Get it all out. Now let me talk about why we're doing this. It's just to clean out the brain. We got to look at everything. Shame likes to hide in little corners in the closet. And we're teaching our brain, like, it's safe. It's completely safe for us to have whatever thoughts we have. Normal, 100% normal. In fact, it would be probably weird if we didn't have these thoughts, but we don't want to keep them because they're not really creating what we want. Lasting relationships that are deep and trusting with our children, emotional regulation inside of ourselves, showing up really well, no matter how terrible our kids are showing up in the moment. So this is what we would do at first. And then you would go to next. Yes, making sure I'm on the right screen. So this was just one little example. Your situation would be whatever would be surrounding your goal. So this would probably not be what you would choose, but this was one that was constantly a problem for me. I had a lot of artistic kids that thought Sharpie markers should be used on the walls. And so, just going through picking one thought. Now, if you wanted to look at the thoughts you just did in the last one, it actually keeps track of a whole bunch of thoughts that you've had from other times, but you can pick one of those or you can start from scratch. And then you will fill out your unintentional steer. Okay. Any questions so far? We're going to move on to the next step: emotions, nervous systems, triggers. This is the part in the pivot that, everybody has different preferences, what they like, but I get a ton of comments from people when we dive into emotions, nervous systems, triggers, because there's some really big awarenesses that come that they hadn't thought of before. People love the steer and the piece, but it can be kind of a lot. So I think people are like, oh my gosh, I have to take ownership for all of this. And I'm like, yes, because you want to change it. The good news is when we can take ownership for how things are, then we can change it. We have the freedom to change it. If we're at the mercy of our environment and we have no ability to make any shifts, then we lose all of our capacity for change, which I think is really sad. So even though this might feel like the worst news ever, I really think it's the best news ever. Okay, let's go on to the A. For everyone, when you go back into the app today, this is new for everyone because we haven't done it like this. You're not going to see peace in the day 2 step because of the way the program works. Because I had you pause halfway through, I can't put it again as a prompt in day 2. So you're going to have to go back to day 1, click it again, and pick up where you left off. Okay. Because we're just doing one piece this week. One piece. Okay. Which hopefully feels not too crazy. For those of you who just completed the pivot, who are here with me kind of getting the overview again, you can jump back into the pivot and repeat it. A lot of people do that. I like to go do it 2 or 3 times to go through it, and really get it. If you're in mastery, you could always jump back in. In fact, I had somebody just message and say, I need to go through the whole pivot with a different child in mind. You can totally do that. But I want us to pull all the way back. So we're in strategy 1. If you remember yesterday, there's 3 CMP strategies. So the 3 strategies: understand my own mind and own behavior. You could say my own nervous system, my own stuff, so I can understand my kids' stuff. When I start giving myself permission to be human, I see that, that was the best I could do. And it wasn't great. It was like a -10 maybe today, but that was the best I could do. And I can see why my nervous system thwarted my capacity today. Then I'm going to be able to live that example for my children, but also be able to teach my children that. And I'm going to be able to show up for myself and my children in that way. Does that make sense? That this statement that everyone is doing the best they can, even if that best is really bad today, is very, very important. Does that make sense? Does anybody hear me say that and you want to scream? And you're like, that is not true. Because I want to make sure that we understand it. I said this to my son. It's my second son, Cooper, who's in Chile right now. And he was like, Mom, that's not true. How could that be true? And he really thought what I was saying is I condone everyone's behavior and everyone gets a free pass and no consequences, meaning like natural consequences for our actions. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that no matter how someone shows up. So if our kid throws a big tantrum, messy room, which has been a hot trigger for me, pushing back, that's a big one, not complying, maybe saying unkind things. I was just recently, there's been a couple of parents I've been working with, and, they come home and the child says something and they retort back like, you can't talk to me like that. How dare you disrespect me? And they just get into this battle, this like, chung, chung, chung. And I say to them, like, he can actually say whatever he wants. We can't control what a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old says. We really just can't. Or a 12-year-old, there was one like that. Or a 6-year-old, like any age, we really honestly can't. As much as we don't want to admit that, we want to say, yes, we can. I can give him a piece of my mind, and then he better listen, or he's going to XYZ, right? No. We just really can't. We just really can't. So can I have boundaries and limits? Absolutely. Absolutely. Am I going to be able to do that well if I'm triggered and when I say you are rude, how dare you talk to me that way? I'm giving him all of my power. Like it's all like shuffled over into his place. And now he gets it all. And I've completely lost my mind. I'm blaming him for how I'm feeling instead of taking ownership for my perception. I have lost all ability to navigate that situation in a good way that will result in any kind of connection at the end. So even though it might be a little bit like, you might hear me say that and say, oh my gosh, no. It's the best news ever to be like, he can't disrespect you. He could say disrespectful things, but you get to choose if you decide if that's disrespectful or not. And if I decide, oh, I'm going to interpret that behavior as he's struggling right now, or he's doing the best he can, and it's really bad. So he obviously is needing some things from someone, something's not working for him. He has a lot of foul frustration. And I can just look at it like that. I'm not saying, hey, and just keep saying unkind things to me and I'm condoning right. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just staying in a place where I can actually move towards him. I often use the phrase, and I haven't used it as much lately, but lean in, listen, and learn. So instead of leaning out, which is often what we do when we think our kids are defying us or rude or unkind, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to pull back. And I got to lay down the law, which is completely counter to what's actually going to work. It's not going to make any difference because we're pulling emotionally back. We're judging them. Who wants to be around somebody who judges? We lose our ability to parent, because if we lose our ability to impact and influence, we lose our ability to parent. Our kids choose us, inherit the ability. We inherit the title of parenting by just either giving birth or adopting or having a child in our home, that we assume the role of parent, but we don't get the right to parent unless they choose us. And that relationship is everything. So let's go back to the situation using the steer, which is freaking amazing. So we're going to use that tool inside of Peace, as you see. So Peace is this process. Steer is this tool we use a couple of times inside of Peace. So I was talking with this one mom, and she was, we were going through it, and not the first and won't be the last that brings up a scenario kind of like this. Son says something. She's like, oh my gosh, she's so rude and defiant. And she tells me this kind of in passing, that we're beginning our call. She's one of my clients at the time. And she's like, oh, this has just happened, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, pause. Like, you're telling me that he is rude and defiant. And she back to the steer. Let's go back to the steer. What did she think it was? She thought it was the facts. She thought it was absolutely just like telling me the news. And she's like, no, he said some rude and defiant things, and he kind of insulted me. And I was like, okay, but what did he actually say? We could do quotes. That's a fact. So we can do quotes. And then what was your interpretation? Oh, your interpretation was the meaning you made from the facts. Okay. The meaning you made from the facts, which then creates the emotion. She was angry, frustrated, annoyed. She felt like he was being, what was her phrase? It's been a while, but it was like, it was something along the lines of rude, or he was being disrespectful. Actually, that's it. I think that comes up so much, disrespectful. And it was like, that was the fact. The fact was, son is disrespectful. It was like, no. That's not the fact. That's your thought about it. The fact is, he said such and such words. Because I could hear the same phrase and my thought could be something different. That's why I know it's not a fact. A grandma could be walking by, a mother who just lost her child could be walking by, a sibling could be walking by, and they'd have all different interpretations or meanings around it. My favorite meaning when a child is having off-track behavior is they're struggling. or they're doing the best they can. I like to add it's okay at the end because that works for my brain, because that's really clear to me that that's not a condoning free pass kind of statement. It's like, oh, and it's okay because, and then my brain has this whole sub story around it's okay. And it's linked to they're doing their best. Their nervous system is obviously dysregulated. They have no prefrontal cortex online. They're emotionally having a takeover. The limbic system is completely in control. Their words don't mean anything about me. They mean something about what's going on for them. It's just information. So I have this whole subplot that is linked to it's okay that just instantly pulls me back into the presence and into a parasympathetic state, which means my prefrontal cortex gets on. Okay. So here's what I want to say. A lot of times we have felt so stuck by the world, by our kids, by our health, by the weather, by whatever it is, right? We're like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck. And then oftentimes we have these different parts of ourselves, right? I'm stuck, which is kind of this victim mode, but don't beat yourself up over it because every single person has one. Victim mode. And then we're like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be victim-y. Oh my gosh, something's wrong with me. This is like, if you don't have it, I'm not good enough, something's wrong with me thread, bravo. Most of us have it and we're working through it. And it just seems to be something that we all get indoctrinated somehow, shape or form. And so like, I'm not good enough. Something's wrong with me. We beat ourselves up and we just like go into this cycle. And we then, I heard this yesterday. The reason that you all got the replay late is because yesterday is like packed. As soon as I got done with you all, I was like, call till late into the night. So anyway, so one of the things that I heard yesterday on one of my calls was, no, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. Like, it's fine. It's fine. It's not a big deal. And like pushing it. And I'm like, stop. We need to stop discounting any of our thoughts. I have a podcast episode coming out about this because it's really important. It's really important. The whole situation that just happened with me at the train station that I was talking about yesterday, that I did a whole podcast episode on a couple of days ago that will come out in a week or two, was because I was pushing stuff aside. I don't want to feel anxious. It's ridiculous that I'm nervous. The kids are obviously not going to get kidnapped, right? I had these like thoughts and I couldn't deal with them. I didn't want to deal with them. I thought they were ridiculous. So I pushed them in the corner as far away as I could until I completely lost my mind at the train station. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it was like so out of character for me. Kristen, I'd love to have you share a light bulb moment. I don't think I can bring you on screen in this platform, but if you'll type it up, I'll put it on the screen. I would love to hear it. If you can, might be too much to type up. And if not, I'll figure out how to bring you all on screen. I'd love to have some of you come on screen tomorrow or next day. So emotions, I'm talking about emotions, right? So we're going to dive into the peace process, and the peace process takes us through a journey. It takes us through a journey. Let me share my screen. The peace process takes us through a journey. This is from the workbook that you all get if you've done Pivot, you recognize this little visual, but this is the peace process visually. I wanted to show it. So I want you to see this visually, and I'm going to review it in a way that is going to be great, no matter if it's your first go round or your 20th, because we need reminders. I think it took me 1,000 times. And it, like, when we cannot be ashamed that we just don't quite get it, like you're going to learn so much faster. And the reason it takes so much time to get it is your subconscious brain is just holding on to the old stories, just holding on for dear life. So if you've been with me, I have clients that have been with me years and they're so made so much progress. And then something new will come up and it's like, oh my gosh, I need to work on this again. Right. So there's always more iterations of it. And so don't ever be embarrassed if you feel like you've heard something and you need to hear it again, or you heard it again and you're like, oh my gosh, I love that. I have a book that I've read multiple times, and every time it's just as good as the first time because I'm hearing it at a different level. So if you've been working with me for a long time, you're going to hear this at a different level. If this is your first time, you're going to hear it at a, more of a surfacey level. It's totally fine. So peace is our main process that we're going to go through to find awareness, to calm our nervous system down, and to create intentions and plans to respond differently in the future. So this week specifically, you're picking your one little micro mini big mama goal. And with that lens, you are going to do the complete peace process. I'm just going to have you do it one time. So you've already done the thought download. This is pause. So pause is you're going to be present with what's happening. The experience is bringing up things for you that you need to see. If you are having an emotional reaction to something, it's because your nervous system has a perception. And if you don't like the reaction that you're having, you want to look at it because that perception is not aligned to your goals. Okay. So you're going to pause and get present to what's happening. So you're going to slow down and you're going to start to like, what can I discover? Now, here's some things that we're going to do our thought download in this part, and I'll pop back over to the app in a second. So what can you discover? You're going to say to yourself, these are some questions you could say to yourself to help you probe the subconscious brain for more information. Writing is a great way. They've shown study after study that when we write, our barrier between our conscious and subconscious brain for a lot of us kind of breaks down so that we can start to access it. So this is a problem because the bedroom mess is a problem for me because this one I actually want to change. I wouldn't put this here. This would be in the A step, but thank you. I hear you. This may or may not be true. I would probably move that. It's great for me to see this. I'd move that into the A step. So we'll circle back on that. I'm upset because this is a sentence in my mind. This is frustrating. This is upsetting. This is like, and then you don't have to use any of these prompts inside of the app. That's where we're doing our thought downloads, but I wanted you to see the big picture. But the pause and get present is just dump every single thing, every thought, emotion, the most immature ones, like put it down. Okay. And then explore is what you've already done as well. But I'm just showing this again. This is where you're looking into the subconscious story. So you're saying, this is what actually happened. I lost my mind. I said this thing. I yelled at the boys, or I stewed about the messy room all day long, or I'm so frustrated every time bedtime comes around. And we're looking at the current way we're being without any judgment, without any resistance, because this is the way that we're going to actually change something. We have to see where we are, just like a Google map. Here's where I am. That's how it knows how to plot you to the future. Okay. Now, today we're diving into affirm, allow, accept. I don't have all of them here, but that is the cluster of A words that for me link to this step. So let's talk quickly about the nervous system. We have subconscious stories that have been logged away as unsafe. And when something in our current life, and our kids do a great job at pinging those stories, something in our current life reminds us of that story, then our nervous system goes into protection mode and tries to fight against or flee or freeze or fawn. You've heard all of those words. I have another set that I'd like to use, but I'm not going to go into them now because we're all more familiar with those and I don't have time to explain it. But we go into this activated nervous system state. And oftentimes after we have had an unintentional kind of situation, or when we've been exploring it and we're looking at our unintentional steer, we can start to reactivate ourselves. We can have judgments. We can have resistance to what is. And so as we're going through the peace process, this is not in real time. I mean, you can do it in real time, but what I'm asking you to do is do it in a reflection back on something that happened. You're going to look at the affirm stage. You're going to be in the affirm stage, and you're going to just remind yourself that this is the experience I'm having. This is the way my nervous system has responded. That's why I love this statement, which is in the wrong place. But thank you. I hear you. This may or may not be true. Are sentences that I would say to myself, from the loving part of myself to the scared part of myself, where my nervous system is dwelling and saying like, this is not okay. I would say, it's okay. It's okay that we're feeling this way. It makes sense. Just as I was walking you through my understanding of why I'm perhaps a little bit more activated, or have been a little more activated around messes, and why that was such a problem for me. And I said, oh, I think it was because of these experiences as in my childhood. And so I understand. I'm like, oh, it makes sense. And if you don't know why, it doesn't matter. If I didn't have any reason, I'm like, I have no idea why I'm so overly activated around messes. That would be okay too, because we don't have to know it. We just need to create safety. In the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is a book that documents the journey of getting it does a lot of things, but one of the things it does is the journey of getting PTSD as a diagnosis so that they could help World War II vets, is when it began. And they were studying, like, why are some of the soldiers who were coming back from the war totally fine? Like, same battle, right? Two soldiers, same battle, some totally fine, integrate beautifully. Some have PTSD, cannot get themselves to be able to reintegrate into their life. And safety was one of the huge factors, safety and support. So we need to give ourselves that safety and support to ourselves. We need to support ourselves there. So I'm going to show you in the app, but just briefly, I'm going to say a couple of things about emotions and nervous system. And I could spend as many of you know, I could spend days and hours, weeks, months talking about this, but an emotion that we have in our body is something we have. I want to be really clear with that. We have it because of perception. The steer helps us see the story that we have around the event, around this factual situation that creates or elicits an emotional response inside of our body. It's as simple as that. There's nothing wrong with us. We're not flawed. Nothing wrong with us, right? So I would challenge all of us this week to be so kind to ourselves as we are noticing the emotions in our body. And instead of saying, I am frustrated, I have frustration. In both Spanish and French, I'm sure they have expressed this multiple ways, but one of the ways they do express it is, or the way they do say it is, I have frustration. I verified this. I verified it a couple of times, but I have a really dear friend who is fluent in Spanish. And I asked her, I said, is this how you would say it in Spanish? And she paused. She's a really smart lady, a really good coach. And she's like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about it like that. Yes, it's, I have frustration. So much more accurate. Neufeld drills this home. My favorite, Dr. Neufeld. I love him. And he's just so adamant in saying, you guys, we have to clearly and accurately use words that are actually speaking to what's happening in our body when we have an emotion in our body. It's something that we have. It's not something that we are. So we have to catch ourselves. Instead of saying, I am frustrated, I am angry. No, now you're owning it. It's part of you. It's defining you. Okay. So if you've heard me say this before, check yourself. Notice how you're speaking to yourself and your children. It makes a difference. If you're using those words, they're going to use those words and they're going to enmesh themselves with the emotional experience they're having and think that is them, instead of being able to differentiate themselves from the emotions they're having and have an emotional experience and not be taken over so easily by emotions. When we think we are the emotion, it's hard to have the freedom to make a different choice, because it's like, well, I don't have any choice. I just have this big emotion. So I have frustration. Second thing I want to say is that there is a difference between emotions and feelings. And if we can begin to understand this, and if you've heard me say this before, yeah, that's right, Gordon Neufeld. Oh, and I see Kristen stuff. I'm going to put it up here. So when we can differentiate between emotions being the subconscious chemical reaction that happens based on the perceptions we have, which we can change our perceptions, which is why we do this work, why we do this steer work, daily peace work with the steer inside of it, because our perceptions were formed because we thought a thought and continued to think the thought until it became a belief. And a lot of times that belief just becomes the facts. And so that is like literally, just like lenses. We don't even notice they're there. Just that is the way we think that the world is. We can change our perceptions, which is why we spend time, way more time than a week, but lots of time just looking at our stories and calming our nervous systems down and creating new ways of looking at things. And that takes repetition. It takes time to change neural pathways, just like it takes time to grow a plant. That's how nature works. Just takes time, which is totally fine as long as we understand that. We don't think anything's wrong with us, that we know this thing, but we can't do it. It's like, yes, that's exactly right. You know better way before you can do better, because there's a lag between what I can consciously be aware of and what I can subconsciously start running from autopilot, which we need to get it to subconscious autopilot mode to start to react in the heat of the moment in a different way. So emotions are the subconscious chemical reaction that happens in our brain that floods our body, that is the result of the thought we have, the perceptions we have. The feeling is the conscious side of that. It's me taking the time to feel the sensations I have in my body, to make sense of them, to move them out. And there's lots of ways we do that. I want to call them out as separate things. And I'm going to reference this one study that they did. And I can't remember what university, I think it was in Canada, but they studied the chemical composition of tears of toddlers, since they're so freely willing to give us their tears. And when they're in the angry stage, the chemical composition is different than when they're in the sad, surrender. They felt their emotions, they let them out, they've calmed down, they've gone the mad to sad route. The chemical composition in the sad tears are a lot of the chemicals that the body was using to go into fight or flight. It's now getting out. It's flushing them out. And that's so cool. That's so cool. And that will happen with us too. We will metabolize the chemicals. Our children also will metabolize the chemical reactions, those that are creating the emotional experience inside of our body, when we can allow ourselves to feel the emotions and go from mad to sad. So beautiful. And shifting our perceptions and thoughts around it is how we begin to do this. We feel them. Absolutely. And when we start to change our filter, our thoughts, our beliefs around something, our chemical reaction, our emotional reaction is different. just becomes a default different. Okay. And then create is intentional. I'm going to show you how to do that. Basically, you go back to the situation that's related to your goal, and you're going to come up with a different way of thinking about it. And it doesn't matter if it's 100% believable to you in the moment right now. We're just imagining a possibility that could be the case. And then the work we would do moving forward would be bridging or ladder thoughting, I call it, like just baby stepping that thought to get closer and closer and closer to that ultimate goal of a thought that created a lot of abundance, a lot of neutrality, a lot of compassion, maybe a little bit of firmness if you needed it, like getting to that place. So that's where you're landing in real time. So, and that's the goal I want you to do in the create stage of peace this week. I want you to go all the way to the end of the rainbow, what you wish it was like, and just see what that possibly could be like for you. And I can check them out. So go do them in the app, and then I can give you some thoughts and we can talk about them tomorrow. The work after that would be, how do we go then move back to a more believable thought and baby step our way until the neural pathway has changed. That is really, really magical. Okay. The last part of peace, which we're not going to be doing this week, is like thinking of one action we want to take. And we're not going to worry about that this week. Okay. So here we are back in the app, and I give you some prompts. So you can click that link and it takes you to some meditations that you can have access to help you. But you're going to spend 2 to 5 minutes. This is where you're going to start today. This is the first step of your homework. You've done the thought download. You've created your unintentional steer. If you haven't done those, go do those as it relates to your goal. Then you're going to sit here and give yourself 2 to 5 minutes. If you want to click on one of those meditations, different ones for different purposes, and it can kind of guide you through. The intention of this step is to allow yourself to feel your emotions and really give yourself so much compassion and love, and give yourself the benefit of the doubt that you're doing the best you can and you did the best you could in that moment. We're creating neutrality and love and compassion around how we showed up in this unintentional steer that we didn't like. Make sense? Make sense? So we're looking back at the unintentional steer that we did in the E-step, and we're saying, oh yeah, I did that. Yeah, it makes sense that I did that. And I'm not condoning how I did what I did. I disagree with how I showed up, but I understand that in that moment, I wasn't able to access anything different. Here's how I know that's the truth is I have yet to talk to a parent who, when we go back and look at a situation that didn't go so well, for me to then say to them, hey, if you could have been more kind and loving and more compassionate, now that you have this awareness around really what was happening, you're able to take a step back, your nervous system is calm, you realize they were just struggling, you realize that they were sleepy, you realize whatever, they have now come to see, would you have done something different? They always say 100%. Well, then the only reason you didn't do it in the moment is because you weren't able to access that part of you. You weren't capable. Either it's a lack of skill set, a lack of understanding, there was extra stresses on you that were causing you to show up in a way that was capping your ability. And so you're going to spend 2 to 5 minutes. And if you want to spend 20 minutes, you can, but I want this to feel really doable. But this step is really important, that you're creating peace and love for yourself around the situation. Okay. And then the final thing is this intentional steer. And we have some really cool features in the app that's going to help you. If you've never done this before, you're going to see them. It's fantastic. You're going to pick your emotions. So if I wanted to feel peace, let's say I wanted to feel peace, then it's going to help me come up with some ideas. So this situation is kind of silly, but my child drew all over the living room wall with a permanent marker. So I'm saying, you know what? Ideally, I would have liked to felt peace in that moment. I could have picked probably something better, maybe confident. I would want to feel calm. I want to feel connected. I want to feel whatever it is. You put that in a second when it decides to give us some thoughts. It's going to generate some thoughts. And these thoughts are generated based on the Connect Method parenting principles. So here's just some ideas. And if none of these resonate, you can choose more. But this is a chance to connect with my child and understand their feelings behind the actions. Mistakes happen, and it's a chance to teach my child about the consequences of cleaning up. My child is exploring their creativity, and we can find a better outlet for this energy. So you could just pick one of those. And then if I was thinking that, and if none of them resonate, like I said, generate more, make up your own. What would I do though? If I was thinking this and I was feeling peace, then I want you to imagine what you would do. Maybe I would go over, if you caught him in the act of coloring, I'd go over and take the markers away. I would do that because that wasn't, what we want to be doing. But then I might, what I would do, and we're going to get into this in a couple of days, briefly review how we show up in a seen and heard. We call it the seen and heard approach. But I would look at him in the eyes. So that lean in, listen, and learn kind of idea, look in the eyes, see if he looked back. I call this establishing a working relationship. I would type more in here, type a lot in here. And then what ultimately I'm hoping the result is that I can set a connective limit and our relationship stays strong, something like that. And I respect how I showed up. Okay. Something like that in the moment. Okay. So that's your work for today. And I'm excited to hear how everyone goes. Okay. Let's see if I can get it just back to me. And I want to show you what Kristen said. Okay. This is so good. So she said, in the early years, it was so easy to fall into fight or flight with meltdowns because we mirror our kids. Yes. We didn't talk about that, but that is definitely, we get caught into their orbit. Emotions match emotions. It's the primal instinct of yawning. Yes. So good. I love that. And so yes, doing peace and steer to remain in executive function versus fight or flight along with our kids is so good. You don't know what you don't know. Then once you know, you can do better. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, and I missed this one. Andy can expand, but learning the nervous system and how kids' logic and reason doesn't come. Oh, yes. We didn't even talk about that. I'm glad you brought that up. Just to really add on to what Kristen's saying, if you haven't ever heard this, the prefrontal cortex starts coming online between 5 and 9. So I always usually hit the middle. I'm like around 7, but it could start to come online 5, 9, could be 12. I mean, there's studies that have been done with kids that are 17 in juvenile halls that don't have much prefrontal cortex action happening in their brain. And so there's this huge gamut based on the environment that they're in and just all sorts of things as well, just about their disposition. And so understanding that it's so life-changing. Yes. Learning that my kids aren't thinking about things the same, that they don't have the logic and reasoning that I have. That's so helpful. A lot of times that will help quell our nervous systems. I like what Amelia said here. Learning to feel my emotions and allow my thoughts has made me a calmer person, which I couldn't and still can't sometimes. So it's true. Sometimes we can't, and it's okay. I was angry the other day and someone said, don't be angry. You can't be angry. And I started to feel silly and wrong. But then I said, no, it's okay to feel angry. Yes, it's okay that we feel whatever emotions we feel. And here's the coolest thing is as we're doing daily peace, we begin to be the observer of our emotions. And this is a constant cycle. Like we're just going to get better and better at it. So I love that I have so many people in here that have worked with me for a while and we're reviewing it. I have people in here, I love it, that I've never heard of any of this stuff. And it's their first pass at it because we all can take this to the next level. I am constantly trying to up-level my skill at noticing my subconscious brain and my programs and my emotions, and life is changing and stresses are changing. And so then my nervous system tries to pull in, or my subconscious brain, I don't know who you want to attribute this to, but it's those old patterns are trying to make their way back into the, to the lead role of our life. And so understanding this process that it's going to change our default. And there's so much, even like once we get this default change and we're like, oh, there's more. I see there's more. So this week we're constraining just to one thing. And I think this is a great exercise, no matter how much or little you've done with me in here, because taking it back to the basics and just reviewing we're going through the entire CMP strategies, the 3 strategies, with one thing in focus in the constraint of 1 week. So we're not going as deep as we normally would, but we're hitting all of the basics and we're taking action. We're not just learning. It's very important to me that we're implementing. That's how we create new neural pathways, is we take the information and we implement. So we're implementing, and that is what is going to help all of us, no matter where we're starting, see something new, understand something different. So that's where we are today. So here's a recap of what to do. Go into the app. If you can't get in, let us know, but just click that link. Make sure you use the right email, the right browser. You're in the same browser as if you do the magic link, it's got to be the same browser. Do the homework. The replay for this will be posted soon, probably within 2 hours. And I believe day 2's, now that you're here with me live and you've gone through the whole thing, I think you can pop into the app. The replay obviously won't be there, but the tools will be there. Go back into week 1, finish peace. So the tool is there under peace. Under week 1, daily peace is there. Go finish it, post a little comment under it, and we'll go from there, y'all. Okay. Tomorrow we're going into how do we consistently connect with our kids? So first strategy is understand our own mind and our own behavior so we can leave room for our kids. The second one is we consistently connect so we can create deep relationships of trust. Going back to what I said about our kids have to choose us. And how do they choose us? They choose us because they trust us and we have a good relationship with them. And all of the work we do in strategy 1 bleeds right into strategy 2 to make that easier because we're not showing up judgy or resistant and they feel this big invitation to be in our presence. So beautiful. So we're going to build to the second strategy tomorrow. We're only spending one day on that strategy. And then we're going right into the third strategy is how do we respond in a connected way? Or I call it, choose closeness. So we're leaning in. We aren't getting dysregulated. So we're going to talk about some really cool stuff there. So that's what's in store for you this week. We'll wrap it all up on Friday. If you need anything, reach out and we'll go from there. Bye, you guys. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, come check out League, my Connect Method parenting coaching program, where we take this material and we apply it using my proven formula. Head over to cmp.works/join.